He slapped me across the face. He said I had testicular cancer.
You are blowing my mind.
Is it ever okay for an older man who is counseling a student to use the boy to satisfy him sexually?
They weren't alarmed that you had bruises and that it was red?
It was all crazy. It changed me completely.
Wow.
I slammed the door.
The red flags were waving.
I'm banging on the tables. I'm screaming.
Hearing.
I just broke down crying, like sobbing. I couldn't control myself. This was my fate, and I had to accept it.
You told them, and they slapped the crap out of you.
For someone who's going to listen to this who's going to be very upset with me for sharing this story.
To Silent No More. I'm your host, Yitzi, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is about listening to the voices of survivors of child sex abuse with the goal of educating our communities and challenging the silence that allows abuse to thrive. Whether you're a parent, educator, advocate, ally, or simply someone that wants to know more about this issue, this space is for you. Before we begin, please know that this episode contains sensitive content, including discussions of trauma and abuse. This podcast is intended for adult audiences ages 18 and over. Please take care while listening. Hi, Yona. Welcome to this podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So to start, can you share a little bit about yourself? What made you want to speak up?
Sure. Hi, everyone who's listening. Thank you. My name is Yonah. I am 43. I grew up in Borough, where I was abused sexually from the ages of before my bar mitzvah, so maybe 10, 11 to 12, 13, over several years. I had experiences where I was abused in the yeshiva building. I had experiences where I was abused in this Medridge, and I had experiences where I was abused in this little camp. At 14 years old, something happened to me, and it was as if everything became silent. And it was as if it was all in the past, and I just started a new chapter. Fast forward to when I was 33 years old, in 2015, I went through an experience, and it sort of, the dam burst open, where I realized I had to talk about it for myself. And that started the journey of finding out it is okay to talk about it. You should talk about it. How do you feel safe talking about it? Who do you talk to about it? And over the years, I've developed, as part of my healing journey, doing advocacy work. So having conversations like this, I think, is really critical in offering listening viewers a perspective in terms of, there is hope, there is healing, but it takes time. So my goal is for whoever is graciously listens to this, to give them feedback, about this topic. So any opportunity I can to spread awareness, I usually jump on the chance.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that when you were 14, something happened, and then it was like as if it never happened. Mm-hmm. Was that like you consciously chose to forget it, or was it something your brain did?
I don't think I consciously chose anything until I was in my early 30s. I later learned through extensive years of therapy that I went into what I now understand is a dissociative state. So it was as if it wasn't a part of my life. And it was essentially my brain trying to protect me because it was an overload.
Wow, that is so fascinating. The brain does seriously amazing things to try to protect us.
Right. And
wow.
The tricky thing is, at a certain point, it also becomes a hindrance to you. So part of the therapy process is learning how to navigate that safely.
Right.
Where I personally will always recommend a good trauma therapist.
Right. Yeah, a good just thing to know is that survival skills are good until they're not. And then you have to unlearn it because it's actually damaging you.
Exactly. And
right.
And the scary thing is there is no timetable for this.
Why do you say that it's scary?
Because when we think of the medical world and healthcare, so think of someone who needs surgery, the doctor will say, we'll be in the hospital for 1 or 2 days or maybe longer. You need 4 months of physical therapy. So that understanding of the time frame, it gives a person a certain sense of peace and calm, knowing, okay, we're 1 day closer to the end, 1 day closer to the end. But with this, you're dealing with emotions and feelings. And in my case, it was 20 years of dissociation. And that was something that I was asking, can you tell me how long it's going to take? And no one can tell me that it was going to take a year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm in therapy now, and it's still 10 years. But I've also learned that my needs in therapy have changed. So what a survivor needs immediately upon disclosure and things like that. So it's a process is the word that I would use.
Yeah, I totally hear that. So do you want to share a little bit about who your abuser was, if it was one person or more people, and how did they get you? What position were they in what did they use to abuse you?
So I went as a typical Hasidic family growing up in Borough Park. I went to a more community-based Hasidic school, not typically associated with a specific Hasidus. And that yeshiva shut down, and it was the middle of the school year, and there was a mad scramble where am I going to go to yeshiva and things like that. And I was the new kid, right? I didn't grow up with these other kids. So here's this new kid joining the class in the middle of the year, not a very wealthy family at all. We were very poor. And I was a loner. I was ripe to be picked on. I didn't click with anyone. I didn't know anyone. And every yeshiva has their own ways of doing things, the kids and things like that. And plus, I was also not academically successful in the Hasidic mainstream yeshiva system. And so I think what happened was the Rebbe in the yeshiva saw that I was vulnerable. And he was sort of the Rebbe that you sort of went to when you needed emotional support, so to speak. And at first he gave me attention. Nothing in the beginning happened wrong. And I also grew up in a home where there was no real attention. And I found myself craving that time frame where he was saying nice things to me. I was telling him about some bullying that I was experiencing, and he was going to take care of it. And I'm like, sure, I believe you. I had no reason not to believe him. Then it started with surprising me with like sweet gestures, like a candy or soda, cookies, or things like that. And so again, I naturally found myself going to him even when I wasn't in a particularly vulnerable state. And that's how he got me started doing things that I now in retrospect realize was inappropriate. A teacher or a Rebbe looking out for a young kid is a nice thing to do, but I didn't realize that there still needs to be boundaries when this happens. There's appropriateness and non-appropriateness. And he was a classic groomer, getting my trust. And then when he started doing things, and it didn't start the worst things to happen right away, it was slowly. It wasn't just, I think that's another way he got me. Like I wasn't in pain the first time. So it's not that bad. And it kept on going. And it was almost like every interaction we had, it was almost like a step up. And it elevated and it got worse and worse and worse. And until it became my living hell. And it was a matter of home life, which was chaotic, and yeshiva life. Those were the only two places I was, home, yeshiva, and shul on, Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? Yeah, there was never a moment where I can just be a kid.
Wow. I feel so sad listening to that. And I heard you saying, I didn't know that there were supposed to be boundaries. And I want to say that I think you know this, but I also want the listeners to know it wasn't your fault. It was not your responsibility to know that there should be boundaries. Of course, we have to educate our children.
For sure. I mean, I now fully understand, and to anyone who's listening, the teacher or the Rebbe or the guardian, they should know what those boundaries are. And if you are not sure if you are violating a boundary, proceed cautiously, err on the side of caution. Never assume. If you, like now as an adult, if I'm in an environment where I feel uncomfortable, rather than assuming someone else is comfortable, I will always proceed with they're not comfortable. But this is a different case where it was an older man who was a teacher, who was a Rebbe, who should have known better. I didn't know that giving me support, and he was giving me emotional support in the beginning, like he would ask for things that were slightly inappropriate. That support, I didn't know that you shouldn't put conditions on the emotional support. And I didn't know at the time, but he definitely knew. The person who abused me definitely knew. But then the other thing is, there is some education that needs to happen on what is inappropriate, what is appropriate. And I think depending on the culture, there needs to be some cultural sensitivity to certain things. But a lot of the story is, there's no foundation to think that it was okay. Is it ever okay for an older man who is counseling a student, in my case, to use the boy to satisfy him sexually? There's no foundation to even begin to say this was okay. Now, I didn't know it was wrong and inappropriate, but he sure as hell knew. And again, when children are vulnerable, whether they are coming to adults for help or the adult is offering them for help, it is the adult's responsibility to respect that vulnerability and not take advantage of it. And that is what that person chose to do.
100%. 100%. You mentioned that it started slowly and you weren't in pain the first time because it was so little, and then it became your living hell. So how did it affect you as a child? So
my personality as a kid before, and again, my household was a bit chaotic, but I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I was joyful, exuberant. I was what you call, for lack of a better word, a normal kid. I was getting in trouble, but nothing too mischievous. I was immature. I was 10 years old, so I was just being a kid. Now, in looking back, I became very isolated. I became very irritable. And for example, I can recall vividly times when I would be in recess and we were playing tag, for example, which is one of the most normal, common games for little kids to play where I grew up. And anytime someone touched me, not inappropriately, touched me on the shoulder, touched me in the back, on the back, ear, and things like that, I would have this reaction that to every kid who I was playing with, it didn't make sense. Because I'm agreeing to it, like, they're not touching me inappropriately, they're touching me on my back, your head, on my elbow. And eventually they stopped wanting to play with me. Because to them, I remember being, the words that we used, I was called crazy. And I don't blame those kids because to them, I was crazy. But what I now understand was I had a secret that I couldn't tell anybody. So I couldn't explain to them why I had this visceral reaction to games that we played countless other times. It changed me completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. Do you think any teachers noticed that?
It has to be the case. I mean, the yeshiva that I went to, it was a large yeshiva. We had 4 parallel classes in each grade. So I didn't interact with all the Rebbeim teachers all the time, right? I knew of them, I saw them around, and sometimes if there was a substitute and whatever, but my Rebbeim who were teaching me every day, my teachers in English education, if I had any, they definitely noticed it. The Menalim or the principals, they definitely noticed it. I mean, how could you not? How does a 10, 11, 12-year-old boy go from being a regular kid where don't touch me, leave me alone, doesn't eat, is crying all the time, is running to the bathroom, just so I can get away from everyone so I can cry, because I wasn't allowed to cry, because I was a boy and I was being emotional. And in hindsight, when I think about it, I think about when we lose a loved one and people see us crying. They don't question the crying because they know it makes sense to them. So they don't have to ask, hey, why are you crying right now? We get it. But when I'm a kid and I'm not in physical pain at the moment, I didn't break a bone or something, and I'm just crying randomly, well, I can't share why. And if I cried, I would be made fun of, or I would be ridiculed, or my abusers would take notice that I was crying. And so the only place I was ever able to cry in relative safety was the bathroom.
Did anyone ask you why you were crying?
Yes, but the kids would ask me, but they got tired of asking me. I don't remember what I would say to the kids, but the teachers and students, they would. I don't remember the Yiddish word they used to, but it was more like, he's just one of those kids who cries.
Okay, so teachers would ask you, but you obviously wouldn't say the real reason, and then they were just like, okay, whatever, he just cries?
The teachers who didn't know me, meaning whether it was a Rebbe from a different grade or someone who just happened to be there, I wouldn't tell them. I got really good at holding it in until I got to the bathroom. And then I would let it out. I would blow my nose, take care of everything in the stall. And then there was a while where people thought I was having stomach problems because I was going to the bathroom so much. And I actually went to...
The signs...
And I was just going to...
You went where?
I don't remember how old I was, 11, 12, but I actually went to a specialist because it got back to my mother and father that I was going to the bathroom all the time.
The signs, the red flags were waving, huge, tremendous. Like, it wasn't subtle at all.
Very much so.
Wow. And I feel like it became a huge thing. It wasn't just the sexual abuse that you were going through. You were also going through everything else around it to hide it. You were crying all the time. You had to lie about it. You then went to a specialist. Like, it just became a huge thing, but not the right thing.
I now think of this as being funny just because I'm an adult now and I know better, but they thought I had testicular cancer.
You are blowing my mind. They thought you had testicular...
That is because there was no known explanation. And again, apparently, I don't want to get too graphic, but when you get abused, that area became bruised and it became red and wasn't its natural color. It wasn't natural. Things were a bit off. And I was never really taught how to take care of myself, just in general speaking. When a young girl becomes a young woman, she's taught how to take care of herself. Now, boys have it differently. There's puberty, there's things happening, their body's growing.
Totally.
And I was medically fine. So what was the issue? So when a doctor had to examine me down there, something seemed off. So they were like, it's probably cancer.
So after it came back that it wasn't cancer, they weren't alarmed that you had bruises and that it was red and it didn't look normal?
That is a question I've asked myself countless times. When a doctor examines me and they notice things that is not the norm. I'm not talking about strep throat, ear infection. Anyone who has children, especially young children, you go through that all the time. But when a doctor notices that, and he was a community doctor. The doctor, pediatrician that I went to is no longer alive. When you say the red flags were there, that's something I really wish viewers would know, that this doesn't happen in a silo. And anyone that I've ever had a conversation with about the abuse they've experienced, whether they share it with me or they share it through therapy or some other support groups, there are layers and layers and layers and layers of the red flags. So earlier when you mentioned it wasn't just the abuse, it was so much more. I sometimes grapple with what is the worst. And now each survivor will have their own opinion of what is the worst for them. And for me, it was a combination of I had to be silent about something. And we teach our kids if they're in pain or they're hurting to come to us. If they don't come to us, go to your grandmother, go to a teacher, go to someone. But also the amount of betrayal that I experienced. Because if once there is a reasonable suspicion, once you see the red flags, once you see a kid's personality changes, don't turn a blind eye. Because not only are you turning a blind eye, but you're allowing the abusers, let me rephrase that, when verbatim, teachers, parents, guardians, doctors, whomever, see something that doesn't feel right for them and they ignore it, they're allowing the perpetrators to continue hurting that child. So for me, it was a combination of the silence and the betrayal of verbatim and teachers who didn't say something.
Yeah, I said this in the last podcast, and I firmly believe that whenever there's a child sex abuser, a pedophile, whatever they are, there's at least one person that's complicit, at least minimum. In most cases, there are multiple people that are complicit, that saw something, chose to ignore it.
I generally do not like making statements such as that, but that is something I absolutely agree with in terms of these things, again, don't happen in silos. And I remember thinking, if you see someone in the way I grew up, if someone didn't belong in the neighborhood or someone didn't belong in the Spanish, or they weren't a non-Jew and they weren't an employee, someone is going to say something because they are afraid of their safety. And that's what you should do. And maybe the person has a reason to be there, maybe the person does not. Since the person doesn't know, they speak to someone in charge. Why is it around this? And this goes something that I passionately believe in, is people do not want to talk about it. People do not want to talk about it. Because if we talk about it like we're doing now, and we acknowledge it, the evil for what it is, then we have to change. And change is hard. And people tell themselves all sorts of things. It can't be true. He's such a nice person. And I'm like, at the beginning, my abusers were very nice to me.
Wow. And how did it affect you as an adult?
So that is a really good question. And I have to answer it in two parts. There's a part before I even acknowledged it and the part after I acknowledged it. Before I even acknowledged it, say from my early 20s or to my early 30s, I was irritable. I was an irritable person. I was quick to judgment. And these are things that I still feel shame over. I was not the best human being in that regard. And I didn't react well to stressful situations. In a way, I was very selfish. And then in 2015, I had what I now recognize was a panic attack. I'm not going to name the case to give him any more fame than he already unfortunately has, but there was a gentleman in the Haredi community who was accused of raping a young woman, and the case actually went to trial. And that whole explosion in the media, not just in the Haredi media, but in even local media, it became a topic of conversation at work. And they were asking me what my opinion is, what my thoughts are, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And finally got to a point where I remember the individual, he asked me, okay, you have opinions all the time. How come you're not giving me your opinion now? And I'm like, okay, you want to hear my opinion? Here's my opinion. I don't know. I'm not going to name the name of the perpetrator, and I'm not going to name the name of his victim. I don't know him. I don't know her. I don't have an opinion. That is my opinion. And because I said I don't have an opinion, and because I didn't come to his full defense, because everyone was saying he's being set up and things like that, my coworkers were basically verbally attacking me for not being like everyone else in the Hasidic community and defending him. And I'm like, I don't know. And I wasn't even thinking about my own experience. It's just a topic I didn't want to go near. And this guy pushed and pushed and pushed. And I snapped and I said, I can believe he is guilty and I can believe he is innocent. I don't know anything. This was before I knew, belief survivors and things like that. But again, I snapped. I went off the rails. My reaction was what I now recognize I was triggered. And I didn't know that I was triggered, but I was triggered. And everything came all at once. All the memories, like I don't have all the memories all the time, but the fact that I was abused and raped as a little boy all came flooding back to me. And I couldn't dissociate anymore. I didn't have the ability. And I had nowhere to turn to. I know this podcast is titled Silent No More. It's something else that I just want to highlight. It's not only do we have to make it safe for people to talk about it, but we also have to get them ongoing support. It's not just a one-time thing we talk about it and it's done with. And each survivor has their own unique needs. And I have said this, even if someone has gone through the same type of abuse that I have gone through, their needs are going to be different. When I opened up and exploded, people were acting like, what the heck is going on? And no one around me really knew. And I'm like, why would they know? So, yeah, I exploded. And I sort of compared to like I was bleeding and no one was doing anything to stop the bleed.
That sounds so scary and alone.
I can tell you after in memories that I remember telling my boss at the time I was working in a retail job, I'm really not feeling well. I really need to go home. And thankfully it was a slow day at work. And he said, okay, go home. It's fine. And I was a responsible employee. So he knew I wasn't the type to play games and things like that. I came home and I went straight into my bedroom. I slammed the door. Again, slamming the door, that's inappropriate, right? I didn't greet anyone in my home. Like, it was as if I was ignoring them. I slammed the door, and no one has a clue. And I'm banging on the tables, I'm screaming. And I just remember I put on something on YouTube or something at the time, and then eventually I settled down the initial phase of it. But it was hours of that feeling like I'm dying. It was scary, yes, alone, because I had no foundation of, hey, I need help. Who can I turn to that will actually genuinely help me and not try to take advantage of my vulnerability that was at the time?
Is that something that you struggled with, getting help, but being able to trust the person because of the history of getting help from the teacher and him taking advantage of that? Do you still struggle with it?
I don't struggle with it as much, but I absolutely still struggle with it just in general, because let's think about it. An innocent child is taught, tell mommy, tell tati, tell the teacher, tell someone, and they'll know what to do, or they'll try their best to figure out what to do. When I needed help, my home life was chaotic. I won't get into that, but it was chaotic. And when I needed help, the people who I would normally turn to, they were the ones hurting me. So who do I turn to for help? I do remember, again, I found through a lot of trial and error, I found a therapist who was very trauma-informed, who did not rush me. He knew that I did not trust him right away. Every time he made a suggestion or comment, I would argue with him like I was arguing a piece of Gemara with him. But he knew I was not arguing with him, I was arguing with myself. And he gave me the patience. And I remember one time specifically where I came into a therapy session, and I don't always have like an agenda when I go into therapy. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I just broke down crying, like sobbing. I couldn't control myself. He didn't say a word. He handed me a box of tissues because I needed it, but he didn't say a word. And I asked him, why didn't you say anything to me? You see me crying. Like, I got into an argument with him. He said, Yona, this is the first time I felt like you've ever been genuinely honest with me. It's how you feel. There is no way I'm going to take that away from you. You needed this. And that's what I'm like, so adults can be trustworthy. Adults can see me at my most vulnerable time and not try and use it to their advantage. Yeah, so that was very profound.
Wow. Well, thank God for him.
Yes.
Yeah, and for good therapists like him that are trauma-informed and understand the complexities of being a survivor.
Very much so. Agree.
Wow.
I think about him. I think about him all the time.
Wow. Let's go back a little bit to when you were a child. The red flags were waving, glaring, sirens. There were sirens. Mm-hmm. What do you wish the adults near you had done? We know what they didn't do. What do you wish they would have done?
I've been asked that question quite a few times over the years, and my answer is more or less the same. Don't stick your head in the sand. And here's the reality. When a child says, someone did something to me, or when a child is telling you things and you can tell that they are uncomfortable, in detail, it's really messy to have to deal with. For example, it would be really messy for my mother and father at the time to have to deal with this issue. It would really be messy for the Hanhala and the yeshiva to deal with this issue, because it would bring a lot of scrutiny, a lot of questions. But the one thing that people keep on forgetting, imagine how much harder it is for the child who's being abused. And so one thing I wish is when a child discloses that they were abused, that it hurts. Of course it's going to hurt. It hurts because we don't want children to be hurting. But how selfish is it where you are asking the child to sacrifice, in my case, my pain, because you might have to do the right thing and it might hurt you? I'm a father right now, and I've been a father for many years. When my children need me, and sometimes they need me in things that are painful or hard, and it hurts me when my children are in pain or going through stuff. But the child is hurting too. And I think as parent, I'm a parent, and if their parents are listening, our children are not a burden for us to sacrifice ourselves over. And if my children are hurting medically, it's going to pain me, but I'm going to take them to a doctor or figure out a specialist until we get some answers. The sexual abuse is on a whole different level, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of things that are scary. So I think by just this podcast, just having this conversation and someone willing to listen to it, it makes it a little bit scary, but it makes it a little bit less scary. And always remember, to a loved one who is hearing that their child is being sexually abused, raped, and things like that, it's going to be painful. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, I appreciate your ability to hold both at the same time and not just say, like, whatever, do whatever you have to do. Whatever you have to do. It's your responsibility. We could still hold that it's painful for the parent. It could be confusing and scary for the parent also. But ultimately, it is their responsibility.
I work in a clinic right now where I support young people who are experiencing first episode psychosis. And I speak to parents of these kids, old-time young kids, older teenager, younger adult, and they say they don't know what to do. I said, one thing I tell them all the time, one thing you're doing correctly, and I can tell you that right away, is you are not ignoring your child. And when they hear that, they're like, oh, I'm doing the best I can with what knowledge. And that's the thing that I want to remind the listening audience. Ignoring the child is not the thing to do. I won't lecture parents on what to do with their children, but ignoring a child when they're in pain and when there are obvious changes.
Looking back, were there moments when you tried telling someone or really wished you could have?
There's someone who's going to listen to this who's going to be very upset with me for sharing this story, but I'm going to share it anyways, because I think it really encapsulates your question to a T. I don't recall ever telling any of my rabbinic teachers directly what was happening. Now, as an adult, I will say, I didn't say this man put his hand on my penis, or this man raped me, or this man asked me to rape him, or whatever. I never said that. And plus, at the time, I didn't have the language for those words.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, did you even know?
I mean, I didn't know what a penis was. I didn't know what it means to have an erection. I didn't know any of these things. There was no sex ed, so I knew there was something there, but I was ignorant. I mean, I didn't know what the word sex was. I didn't know what making out was, what kissing was. I was like clueless, very uneducated. And I remember one time where I was being abused by a certain teacher, and I remember trying to tell my Rebbe at the time, who was not my abuser, who ended up becoming my biggest abuser. I tried telling him, and I remember I was doing with hand gestures. I was putting my hands like, look down, things. And I don't remember the words because I was petrified. I was petrified to tell him. But I remember, I think the thing with survivors of child sexual abuse, some memories are ingrained in their head, and then they question why they can't remember others. And this is something to this day I will never forget. I remember going to my Rebbe at the time and telling him, because the abuse had gotten bad in my mind. It was bad from the beginning, but it got to the point where the love I thought I was getting, there was no pretense. It was just abuse. It was just sexual abuse and just his gratification. So I remember telling him, and I remember, like, I had the visual memory of when it clicked into his head of what I was saying, because I was not direct. It clicked in his head, and I'm going to say it in Yiddish, what he told me, and then I'll translate for the listening audience who don't know Yiddish. He slapped me across the face, and he said, "Shmil Yona und tu nicht werden wegen der Sachen," which means we're not allowed to talk about such things. And I was stunned. Like, I was shell-shocked because I had experienced being hit in yeshiva as a kid. But when it was happening, now again, obviously any physical abuse is never okay. But when it was happening, I knew why it was happening. Because I didn't know the Gemara, I didn't know the Chimish, or I did some mischievous thing, whatever the case was. But I accepted that getting patched or hit was a normal occurrence in yeshiva. But whenever I got hit, I knew why I was getting hit. I had no clue why I was getting hit. So the only thing that I could conclude, because I had to try and understand what was happening, was I was talking about something I should not have spoken about. So I got the message. It was ingrained into me that we do not talk about sexual related matters. Now as an adult, I recognize that this is not me in the cultural sensitive community that I grew up in, just being sexual and flirtatious and just being promiscuous. This wasn't like, hey, I'd done something with another boy, where it was mutual play discovery, or that I had a girlfriend or anything like that. Someone was hurting me when I felt like it was hurt, and when I believed it was hurting me, and when I knew it was hurting me, that I'm not allowed to talk about it. And then I got to thinking, well, so what do I do? So I accepted at the time, because this was my fate, and I had to accept it. I'm saying this is what happens when adults ignore the signs of children. It just perpetuates and makes the problem even worse.
This adult didn't even ignore it. You told them, and they slapped the crap out of you so that you never, ever speak of it again.
Yeah. And
I wonder if this was around the same time you started dissociating to cope with it. Because there was like no help ever. No.
It could be triggering when I stopped dissociating, but after I went to a different yeshiva where I was not being abused anymore sexually, they were still going through physical and bullying, and I got accused of doing something that I didn't do. Ironically, at 14, I was accused of talking to a girl, and I wasn't talking to girls. In hindsight, I wish I would have talked to girls, because as a 14-year-old boy, sure, I was curious, but I wasn't. I thought it was the cool thing to do.
You should have been.
Right, but in the community I grew up in, you didn't do that, right?
Yeah.
So I remember getting kicked out of yeshiva for, again, talking to a girl. And when I went home, and my mom at the time just went off on me. And I'm like, you're not even letting me say anything. You're not even letting me explain. Like, I don't know what this guy is talking about. What girl? And it led to a trigger warning to anyone who's listening. I'm going to say something that is hard to hear, but it led to a suicide attempt. And that suicide attempt, when the knife was taken away from me, that's when I went into a deep dissociative state for about 20 years.
So not only did you try to tell someone, you finally got the courage, decided to tell someone who then later abused you, by the way. I have no words. You had no one. You didn't have teachers, your parents. There wasn't even an option for you. There was no option for you to tell. There was just no way.
Right. And that is why I kept it. I now understand, because this is a question I've been asked before. Okay, I can understand why you didn't know when you were being abused that you were being abused, because you had no awareness and no nothing. But you got married. You were an adult. You didn't know then. And I'm like, it's not a question of I didn't know. I was not ready. And that is just a message that I'd like to send out is you can't force a survivor to be ready until they are ready. It's hard work, but be non-judgmental, patient, and let them know it is okay for them to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a great message that we shouldn't push them to be ready.
I mean, I've been doing advocacy work for a while now in different formats, and one of the things that I will always ask a survivor who is brave enough to share with me their story, what I think is important matters less to what you think is important. If you would like, I can share you what your options are and whatever choice you make. And survivors will choose many different ways of going about it. Some will choose the legal route, some will choose the civil route, some will choose the criminal route, some will choose, no, therapy, I want to keep this to myself. And I'm like, okay, that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I was not given any option. The only option I had was silence. And there is a phenomenon in any survivor support group that I've ever been to. There are some survivors who are very chatty about their experiences, and some survivors who are, let's just say, not so chatty about it. No one will tell the non-chatty ones to be quiet, to talk about it, I mean. No one will tell the chatty ones to stop talking about it. And I know in the particular, we're talking about the different community, the Hasidic community that I grew up in, I sort of want to give the audience a living example that I grew up in. My maternal grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And my maternal grandfather, rarely ever spoke about his experiences. Rarely. When it came time to yard site, maybe he shared some stories. It was didn't talk much about it. His wife, my babi, always spoke about her experiences. Very chatty about it. Like non-stop sharing stories about her experiences. And what was amazing about their relationship was she never told him talk about it, and he never told her shut up. And when I think about supporting survivors, I really look at them because that is a trauma that the Holocaust that I cannot begin to fathom. And I'm thankful that I can't begin to fathom it because that's not an experience I went to. So when I support survivors, or when we support survivors, is listen to them. What do they need? Not what you think they need. What do they actually need? What do they want? What are they ready for? And yes, so listen.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that's very good. We covered a lot of points for caregivers, parents, teachers, here and there. Do you have any other advice for teachers, caregivers, best practices, anything that comes to mind?
So I have a couple things that I wish I could share. Number one, get educated. If you are going to be a parent, if you are going to be a teacher, a Rebbe, a Menahel or something, get educated. Number one thing. And by education, I mean, don't pretend as if it can't happen in your place. Don't assume it can't happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I hope to whatever anyone believes in that it doesn't happen, but it happens. It happens in Hasidic communities, Litvish communities, modern Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, not Jewish, Catholic, all over. The statistics are just, I think, 1 in 6 boys. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So, number one, actually educate yourself about what you're supposed to do if you're not sure. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, I would say when a child is vulnerable, whether they are, and you can tell they're being vulnerable or they're not the same, be curious why that child has changed their personality. A child doesn't go from being, some children are naturally very reserved and shy and quiet, but if they go from naturally shy and reserved and quiet and all of a sudden they're bouncing around, all of a sudden, what happened? Be curious, pay attention. That's something else. And the reverse, when a child goes from being just hyper, what they call, and all of a sudden they don't want to talk to their friends anymore, they don't want to go to yeshiva, pay attention, be curious, be intentional. And even though you're a person's job, maybe, I'm here just to teach Gemara, or I'm here just to teach Chumash, or I'm here to be a Menahel, I'm here to do this. I hate to break it. Your job is to be a caretaker for children. When I send my children to yeshivas and schools, I am asking them to keep my children safe. Number 3, even when you see a colleague go into the bathroom right after a child goes into the bathroom, walk right in and say, what are you doing? This is not appropriate. There are many different examples that I can point out to, but don't turn a blind eye. Yeah. Don't turn a blind eye. Don't turn a blind eye. And here's the thing. If it turns out the child is just going through emotional, good. That means he's being a healthy kid. But what if it's not? And the other thing, the more I do advocacy work, the more I talk about it, and I think this is not something that gets spoken about enough. Seek out your own support too. when we find out a loved one, a child or a grandchild or sister, brother, whatever the case is being hurt, it's going to hurt you. It is. And just like the child needs support, so do you. So, in short, I would say be informed, learn what best practices actually are, do not turn a blind eye, and get your own support.
Wow. That's really good advice. I said this before, but I appreciate how you look at it holistically and not just from a survivor's perspective, but also from other perspectives as well. What helped you heal? What helped you come to this place?
Where I am now, therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy is one thing, but I think that and this is, I don't know how to say this, how some might react to it, but there were people who were kind, who were genuine, who didn't try and take advantage of my vulnerability. I remember a while back ago, I was speaking to a 17-year-old young woman who was going through sexual violence. And the person who asked me to reach out to this individual, I said, we have to be very careful. I'm an adult. This is a minor. This child doesn't know me. How does the person that we're talking to feel safe? Do we know who the perpetrator is? Are they in immediate danger? So I think what happened was when I started learning the message that is, for lack of a better word, bullshit. When I learned it's not that you're not allowed to talk about such things, but how can we create a safe space for you to talk about it? It's not something I think anyone should be forced to talk about. Like if a survivor chooses not to talk about it, that is their choice and that is their right. But we have to. A space was created for me where I was allowed to talk about it. So to me, and now, but I've taken that a step further in that some people are bothered by the fact that I talk about I was sexually abused all the time or I was raped all the time. And I'm like, if someone is having a response to that and it bothers you, you're more than welcome to walk away. But I'm not going to change myself to make you feel better. If I, as a survivor, feel like I need to talk about it, I will. Now, are there places where it is appropriate and inappropriate to talk about it? Sure. Are there other people whom it's less appropriate to talk about certain things? Sure. I don't think it is appropriate for me to talk about this with my children.
For sure.
To tell them what I had gone through in details, that's a no-no. But when people don't want me to talk about it, I'm like, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
No. And being silent about it has gotten you where you were already. And that was not a good place. So now we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to talk about it and not be silent, because being silent only protects the abuser. It does not help you. I mean, if you choose to be silent, fine. But yes, 100%.
Again, what I believe I don't like making declarative statements for survivors, but I do think there are some universal truths. What survivors need are safety. What survivors need is time. What survivors need is, don't take it personal where they don't trust you right away, because they've just been hurt in the most vile, disgusting way possible. What survivors need is options, information. How do you want to heal? Do you want to try this? Do you want to try this? I've gone with survivors to the police station to file a police report. And then we're in an Uber on the way there and they changed their mind. And I'm like, are you scared or do you want to change your mind? If you're scared, maybe that is something we can work on. But if you tell me you change your mind, I'll turn the Uber around right now. And so to me, the universal is listen to the survivor. I can only say, this is how I would heal. This is how I wanted to heal. But so I'll never tell anyone you should do this, you should do this, or you should do that. But it should be the survivor's choice. And if we were to put it another way, when a child is being abused, when a child is being raped, and we have to get comfortable saying the word abused, raped, and things like that, what happens is their choice gets taken away from them. When anyone gets raped, their choice gets taken away from them. Their consent gets taken away from them. Their autonomy their independence gets taken away from them. Their individuality gets taken away from them. They're robbed of all these different things. I would think it would be common sense to return that to the survivor. Give them their autonomy back. Give them their choice back. Give them their freedom back. Give them the respect back. And it's okay to not agree. I've had many disagreements with survivors about how to seek help. But again, you're never going to hear me argue with them.
What is your message to survivors?
Well, this is probably the most emotional question that I can probably answer, because there was a time when I didn't think I would be able to answer this question. There was a time when I thought I would be asked this question and I would have this large reaction where this question would trigger me. And I can be emotional about it and not get triggered by it. So they're two very different things. If I had a message, it would be, I know you have been hurt. I know you have been taken advantage of. I know a lot of what you're going through makes absolutely no sense right now. And there's confusion, there's shame, there's guilt, there's a lot of things. But there is hope. The unfortunate part to get that hope is you have to take a chance. And there are people out there who will listen to you. They won't criticize you. They won't judge you. I'm not saying it is going to be easy. It is one of the most difficult things that I can think of for any human being to do, especially if they are a child survivor of sexual violence, which is my experience. And adults too, but in my experience, is ask for help. There are people who will help you and not try to take advantage of you. There's an organization called ZAAKAH, www.zaakah.org. I am a huge fan of their work. For what it's worth, they have my endorsement. Also, full disclosure, I do some volunteer work for them on their Shabbos Yom Tov Care Warm Line. It is okay for you to ask questions. It is okay, like, why do you need this information from me? What is the point of this? Ask questions. Ask, how is this going to help me? So that's something else. And depending on your locale, I would also like to plug, there's an organization called RAINN, www.rainn.org, their National Sexual Assault Hotline. That it's an anonymous service. It can be, hey, where can I get help? You can ask them questions. Hey, I was sexually abused or raped as a child. Do I have legal options? If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to someone in person, it's an anonymous service. You can chat with them. They can maybe connect you with resources. I know a lot of professionals out there will say, psychiatry, you have PTSD, you take this pill, this pill, this pill. I'm not personally a fan of medication, me personally, but a trauma-informed therapist is everything. And if you're not sure if the therapist is trauma-informed, have them. And here's one more thing that I'll say about this. When we go to a doctor, when we're not physically not feeling well, we know they went to medical school, right? But when they tell us, hey, take this medicine or have this surgery, we ask them questions. Why should I take this medicine? Why should I have this surgery? Isn't it risky? And then you have a conversation with them about, is this the most appropriate thing for me? And then you decide whether you want to accept their advice or not. And I know I would never take the advice of a doctor if the doctor doesn't allow me to ask them any questions. When it comes to therapists, you can interview your therapist. I know I've asked a therapist this question quite a few times. Why should I hire you? I'm paying you to help me. You're working for me. I'm not working for you. How are you going to help me? Why should I be the one? Therapists can cost several $100s an hour. So I should pay that. I can rant about that, but really be brave. There's a mantra that I live by. It's called live like a warrior. And you get to define what warrior looks like for you. No one else does. Not me, not anyone in the world. And also something else that is critically important. I may not know you. I may not never get to know you. I can give you my contact information that is available for people to reach out to if they want to, in any manner, shape, or form, anonymous or not. But I think the thing that what survivors need to hear more than anything else is, I believe you. We believe you.
Wow, those were all such good points. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I know it could and will make a difference in people's lives, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you for joining me on Silent No More. If today's conversation moved you, taught you something new, or gave you a moment to reflect, I hope you'll share it with someone else. Together, we can create a world that listens to survivors, protects children, and breaks the silence around abuse. If you or someone you know is a survivor and needs support, you're not alone. You can find resources in the episode description, including national hotlines and healing organizations. To stay connected, follow along on Instagram at Better Safe Than Silent, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, stay informed, stay compassionate, and never be afraid to speak up.